There is this idea that when our brains evolved, they evolved to receive more consciousness rather than to become more conscious. Okay, so there's like two ideas that prevail. Okay, one is that our brains evolved to become more conscious, and this relies on the idea that, literally meat can create consciousness in some way. I don't understand that. That's way beyond, I don't know how that would work. But the idea that our brains evolved to receive more consciousness relies on the idea that consciousness is a universal, natural force that we don't fully understand yet, that permeates literally everything. So when our brains evolved, they evolved to receive more consciousness. And this is growing in popularity. I believe this idea is the one that makes the most sense to me. But what that means is that understanding the basics of our brains is also understanding how we can consciously work with our consciousness receptor. So how we can consciously wield our brains in a way that is like working with consciousness. So we can essentially use our consciousness receptor to steer our conscious experience in a conscious way. It's like I'm saying consciousness too much, but it's this idea that we can utilize our physical antenna for consciousness in a way that is essentially taking control of our spiritual experience. This isn't really a new idea in the spiritual community that one can literally consciously steer their experience by working with their conscious and unconscious and subconscious mind. It's like not a new idea, but I did want to talk about some very simple facts about the brain that I have learned over the years, to talk about how those come together in such a way that makes it easy for us, like once you understand how they work, because I think that part of it not being common knowledge, the bare basics of how our brain works, part of the fact that the way that like is a little bit intentional, I think, is that it keeps us in a state of hopelessness. And the facts that I'm going to explain to you today that are very simple facts about how our brains work are like essentially once you know, you are making a very conscious choice whether or not you want to choose to be hopeless or not when it comes to your spiritual and your the way you view your experience and the way you feel about your experience. And this is mostly in regards to mindset, okay? I'm not trying to do the whole thing where I'm like, you can just general mindset. Don't take extreme situations and think that I'm saying that you get to choose how you feel. I mean, you can do that if you want. That's up to you. Some people find it empowering. I find it empowering. Other people don't like to hear that, and that's fine. But I'm mainly talking about general mindset, which is just everyday, day-to-day mindset. If you struggle with everyday, day-to-day mindset and you feel like you don't have control over your mind, then here are some very simple facts. Like if you feel lazy, if you feel like you're just not motivated, if you feel like if you're somebody in the spiritual community who really, I am this way, you want the most psychicness and intuition you can possibly have right now, which is not physically possible, I don't think. I mean, it could be, I don't know, but it's not realistic to think I'm gonna be at the extent of my potential right now. But if you are somebody who wants more intuition and psychicness, and you want less inner turmoil, laziness, or not laziness, but lack of motivation, lack of willpower, these will be very simple facts that can help you to kind of take control of your mindset, okay? So, and this is actually the most, I feel like this is going to end up being short because this is the most simple logical flow that I, as an ADHD person, have ever been able to put together. And it's because I wasn't thinking about it. Like I wasn't trying to plan. I was just like, write it down. Actually, I'm pretty sure I was given the information because I went to do intuition first, and then something was like, nope, do this one first, then this one, then this one, then this one. And then I realized that the information builds on itself. Like, the first fact is just the first fact, and then the second fact adds little context to the first fact, so on and so forth. There's literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. And the fifth one isn't really a fact. It's just my opinion on intuition. So I do want to say that most of this information comes from, not most of it, but like half of it comes from this book. It's a really good book. And whatever doesn't come from this book comes from the fact that I'm just like a psychology nerd. This book talks about how to utilize your body's natural chemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. It also talks about how to like basically increase these chemicals within us with behavior and stuff like that. So the first thing is simple neuroplasticity. Everyone talks about it. The idea of neuroplasticity is this idea that our brains they're plastic. They're adaptable. We can rewire our brains throughout our entire lives. It's much easier before your brain is fully developed, but it's possible our entire lives. Neuroplasticity is a thing that we can work with if we so choose to. We can self-induce it our entire lives. And you can literally look up how to do it. It's really easy, but most of it is just like anything that challenges your mind is going to induce neuroplasticity, and then you can consciously choose what to do with it from there. So like learning something challenging, or trying to challenge your perspective or the way that you would typically perceive or feel about something. So like one thing is, if you tend to have like, this is a very simple example, but if you tend to have like a pessimistic mindset, then your brain is just used, and this is one I struggle with, okay? None of these are fucking easy at all. But if you have a negative mindset and you kind of expect the worst, then your brain is used to expecting the worst, and it's going to continue to want to expect the worst. It's going to be very, very hard to try to change your mindset to a more optimistic one. However, that leads me into the second fact. This comes from, and I'm going to explain this in the terms that I can best understand them, which are very, very simple. This is my understanding, but there's a part of the brain called the AMC. I think it's like anterior medullary cortex or something like that. It's a big word, but you could probably just type in AMC brain if you want to know more. And it's like a willpower part of the brain. And essentially it like knows, I don't know how it knows, this feels like magic, but it knows when you make yourself do something that is difficult. It knows when you make yourself do something that is difficult for you to do. But it's good for you. So like, if you're like, I should really eat more vegetables because I never eat vegetables and I need more vegetables, then your brain knows if you force yourself to eat vegetables, like if you're like, I know, like I'd rather have a pizza, but I know I need vegetables, and you make yourself eat vegetables, your brain knows that, and your AMC gets stronger. It gets like easier to use. Essentially, the more you use it, the stronger it is, the easier it is to do things that you know are good for you. And every time you resist doing something that you know is bad for you, every time I drink a second cup of coffee, I'm really anxious all day, but I really want a second cup of coffee. Every time you resist that second cup of coffee, your brain somehow knows that you resisted the thing that you know is bad for you, and your AMC gets stronger. I don't understand how it knows, because that's like really weird if you think about it, that like your brain knows if you resist something that's bad for you, and if you push yourself to do something that's good for you, it knows. I don't know how it can discern between the two. And also it's like what's good and bad is going to be different for every single person. So literally it's like there's some magic going on in our brains, okay? So basically, like, this goes along with neuroplasticity because there is a lot of information about how essentially if you're used to pessimism and chaos and things of this nature, then that's basically like the neural pathways in your brain. Your brain is used to that. It's really easy to use that route. And when you decide you're going to consciously switch routes, your brain, it's like hard because you have to carve a whole new pathway. It's really hard and it feels really weird. But if the more you do it, the more you're activating like the willpower part of your brain, and the easier it's going to be to keep doing it, to keep doing the thing that is unfamiliar to you, but you know is better for you. And then we get to dopamine, which this goes along with AMC and with neuroplasticity. So dopamine is our chemical that is motivating us to do things. It stimulates, specifically I learned from Andrew Huberman's podcast about, he has like a few about ADHD and I don't remember which one it was, but he talks about how like there's this misconception that ADHD is a lack of dopamine, but actually ADHD is just like the dopamine doesn't necessarily know where to send itself to, like it goes to the wrong parts of the brain. So dopamine is the chemical that stimulates the part of your brain that you want to be activated. And like, I think it could probably be, I mean, the way that it talks about it in the dose effect, it talks about it as if it's like also just like specific to whatever you're doing, whatever you want to do. So like, in order to get more dopamine, we have to focus on something that is like taking a step towards a goal we want to achieve. So like, if you have a goal of being able to run a 5K, then every time you train to run that 5K, you're giving yourself dopamine. If you have a goal to become better at knitting, then every time you spend an hour knitting, you're giving yourself more dopamine. If you have, like, you're raising your baseline dopamine. If you have a goal to read more, then every time you read, and actually in this book, it gives a really good example putting together dopamine and AMC. So like it gives the example of if you have a goal to read more, to read an hour every day or something like that, then every time you read for an hour, because that's your goal and you're achieving your goal, as you're reading, you're getting more dopamine. And it talks about how the AMC plays into this. It talks about when you first start reading, because if you're not like used to making yourself read, even though you know it would be good for you and you want to, and you don't necessarily, you might have like depleted dopamine levels, then reading will feel really hard and you really won't want to do it for about 15 minutes. And then dopamine will start to kick in and you'll start to crave to read more and more. And the more you do that, the stronger your AMC gets. So even though it feels really hard to do the thing that you know is the thing that's going to be beneficial to you and working towards your goal, when you first start doing it, then it's like, feels hard, but then you start getting dopamine. And each time you do it, it gets easier and easier because your AMC gets stronger. I think it is important to mention, it's like one of the most important things that I have had made clear to me also from this book, The Dose Effect, is that most of us are actually operating off of like really depleted dopamine levels because most of our society is set up to get quick hits of dopamine, meaning you're getting a reward without having to do any sort of work towards it. So you get this like spike of dopamine, but because we didn't work to get that dopamine, it is followed by a dopamine crash. So it's not like we have the spike, but then we have a crash. So it's actually depleting our dopamine. It's not giving us more, it's depleting it. So I just feel like that's important to note because there's a lot of conversation about like, as an ADHD person, dopamine seeking behavior, but it might be dopamine seeking, but it's actually depleting dopamine. So then the next thing that I actually recently realized, because I'm into subconscious stuff, like I went to school for hypnotherapy a few years ago, and I've always been into that kind of stuff. But I recently realized that there is a difference between the subconscious mind and the unconscious mind. So the subconscious mind, well, let's start with unconscious first. Unconscious is stuff that you are completely not aware of. The unconscious mind is responsible for automatic body functioning. So like things that your body just does automatically. Heartbeat and, you can control your breathing, but like breathing, if you're not thinking about it, it's all your automatic body functions. It also does something called predictive coding, which I'm sure I could go down a whole rabbit hole with that. But like from my understanding, what it basically is just your brain takes the information in and like it sends a lot of the information that we take in to our unconscious mind, because our conscious mind cannot possibly hold all of the information that we take in. So it takes a lot of the information that we take in to our unconscious mind, and it writes like predictive coding that's like, okay, so this is usually when this happens, then this happens. And usually when like this is the layout of this area. And it like writes these like predictive understanding of the world around us to make it easier for us to function. It also holds on to anything that we think is useless or anything that we think our conscious mind cannot hold on to. So this can include repressed memories and trauma and things of this nature. I myself have had experiences where repressed memories suddenly become conscious, and like my conscious mind still tries to tell me that's not real, that's not real, that's not real. But the problem is that when the unconscious repressed memory came up, I started having like putting pieces together of all these behaviors that make me go, oh, fuck. Like, I knew, even though I don't have the memory, I knew somehow. Like, it must be predictive coding. Because even though I didn't have the memory, I knew and acted accordingly because I started remembering all these instances in which I had weird behavior and had no idea why I had weird behavior. And I was like, I'm just being weird and paranoid. But then when I finally had the repressed memory come back up in a deep meditative state, I was like, oh, fuck, this all makes so much sense that I've been doing for my whole entire life. That's crazy. So your unconscious mind holds on to memories and feelings and experiences that it thinks that you can't consciously process or deal with. Now, the subconscious mind is things that are like poking up. It's subconscious. So it's just like poking its little head above the surface. And my experience with the subconscious mind is that essentially it is going to bring things up when it feels that your unconscious mind no longer wants to hold on to it, and when it feels like you're ready to deal with it. So if there is some sort of feeling or experience that your unconscious mind has been holding on to for an extended period of time or however long, but now it's like, okay, this is creating too much havoc, and I think that it's time, like, I don't want to hold on to this anymore. I don't know what to do with this anymore. Or like, maybe, I think I did read that if it begins to go against your predictive coding that's in your unconscious mind, like if that past experience begins to challenge the predictive coding that is going on in your unconscious mind, that it will start to creep up to the surface, because your brain will be like, what do we do now? I've been holding on to this experience for so long, and now it's being challenged by my predictive coding measures. And so like, either like your unconscious doesn't want to hold on to it, or your unconscious wants to understand it more, or it's just causing too much havoc and taking up too much space. It will start to poke up to your subconscious mind. And what that feels like is a lot of how people say intuition is quiet. And that's the last thing I want to talk about, is like, I don't really like the saying intuition is quiet that much, because even though I feel like it's not as realistic and in your face and visceral as this reality, I don't think it's so much quiet as it is it's like buried under layers of other stuff. Okay. But the subconscious just like pokes its little head up into the background. So it's kind of in the background of your thoughts. And it's kind of a practice in its own right to begin to catch yourself in a subconscious thought, because it'll be a reoccurring thought that plays in the background. It might get to the point where it starts to get loud. Like if your brain really doesn't want to hold on to it anymore, it might start to get really loud and like poke itself up, so that's like all you can think about. You're like say your subconscious mind is feeling a feeling about like a past experience. It might be like hey, remember this? Hey, remember this? Hey, remember this? And just like keep poking itself up until you acknowledge it. But the more that you learn, like sometimes it does just kind of come up behind the scenes to where you have to kind of recognize like, oh, this keeps coming up. And it's just something that the more you pay attention to, or the more you allow yourself to become aware, the easier it is. And this is something I have to remind myself every single fucking day, and I struggle with it all the time. But you can't do that immediately. Like, you cannot just be like, I'm going to pay attention to this and figure it out today. It doesn't work like that. It's kind of one of those things where you have to wait. Every time it pops up, you become aware, you work with it, you notice, etc. So then I think what happens, I'm not too clear on this, but I think what happens is when a subconscious issue becomes addressed, it goes back to the unconscious mind to be so your unconscious does the predictive coding. And then when it's like, what the fuck? It sends it up to the subconscious. And then you deal with the subconscious, and then it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then it goes back to the unconscious. I think that's how it works. Regardless of the exact process, and it's probably different for every person in every situation, from situation to situation, but regardless of the reason, when it comes to the subconscious, that means like when it starts to poke its head up subtly, that means that it's ready to be addressed. And what I have been working with that kind of puts all of these things together is when the subconscious thing comes up and it's ready to be addressed, I will use different techniques like meditative techniques, journaling techniques, things of this nature to understand the thing and to essentially understand why this no longer fits with my worldview or like my life experience. Like, for example, if you have a childhood repressed fear come back up, or a childhood repressed, like a feeling, one thing that I have a lot is like my inner child will have feelings and fears, feelings, and like reactions that are coping mechanisms that were created as a coping mechanism, but are now essentially going against what my conscious mind and my unconscious mind want to deal with, or it's going against the experience of my conscious and my unconscious mind. So that inner child coping mechanism will start to pop up to my subconscious mind, and I will essentially assess it via different meditative and journaling and things of this nature techniques. And once I understand, like, oh, this is why my inner child wants to do this or wanted to do this, and this is why it no longer works this way, and this is the way that it would work better now, and I'm explaining the process of hypnosis, but I don't like following rules, and I don't like structures, and I don't like formalities, but this is exactly how I was taught hypnosis. I guess that I don't like to do it in like a structured, close your mind, because I don't do, like, I went through the schooling, but I don't do hypnosis on people really, but the way that I was taught was exactly what I'm explaining. Anyway, so when it starts to come up, like say an inner child coping mechanism comes up, and you're like, you do the meditative techniques to understand it, and this is probably why I don't like doing formal hypnosis sessions, because what I have found for myself is that experience alone is something that can take weeks and weeks and weeks. And I personally don't believe that one can do affirmations or suggestions with in a way that is effective and productive without understanding like what the brain doesn't already believe. Because one thing that I was taught in hypnotherapy school is that if the brain, like if your unconscious and subconscious mind absolutely do not believe the affirmation or the suggestion that you're telling it, then it's not going to do anything. It's not going to change. If it doesn't believe it, it's not going to make any changes. So your brain has to believe it at some level, which is why I have found that I have to understand the thing first. And that is something that can take weeks, months, years, depending on how deeply ingrained the thing is and depending on like how stubborn your brain is holding on to it, essentially. But like after understanding the thing, then I take measures. So it comes up to the subconscious to be addressed. I address it. I work to understand it. And these are the two key factors I have to understand. Why did my brain think this would be useful? Why did my inner child think this would be useful? Why were they doing this? Or why is this thing, why did it happen? Like, it doesn't have to be, why would this be useful? It could be, why did my inner child decide to do that? Why does my subconscious and unconscious mind make these associations? But you want to know why it was created. And then you want to know why it is no longer useful. Why is it getting in your way? Then once you understand why, and this is the constant technique that I'm using over and over again. Once you understand why you created it, that creates this like catharsis in itself and this release in itself. Then you understand why it's no longer useful. You take the reason why it's no longer useful. And this is another part of the why. You want to know why it was created because this helps to mitigate shame. Like, for example, if I have a tendency to have a temper tantrum in a certain situation and I discover that it's an inner child coping mechanism, it is helpful to know why I had that coping mechanism to begin with. So I can go, you had this coping mechanism whenever this certain situation happens because you felt that it kept you safe because of XYZ, whatever the situation is. But like you want to know, one reason that I like to know why I created that coping mechanism is so that I can mitigate shame and go, yep, you were a kid, this was the best you could do, da 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 da, or like it might not always be your inner child, but you get what I'm trying to say is if you know why you do the thing, then, and it has to, this is my experience, it also has to be real, because I've tried to rush through this shit and like create excuses and it just doesn't fucking work. My experience is that it literally does not work. If I'm like, I am so tired of dealing with this, I'm just going to assume this makes the most sense, and then it doesn't, like, it won't, your brain's not going to let it go because it wants to truly understand the situation. And this is the way that I'm kind of taking it in right now, is that your brain is like the part of your brain that does the predictions and creates like your responses and all this other stuff. It's like, this is not adding up with this. I don't know how I'm supposed to deal with this situation. So say it's like you're the manager or the supervisor, and your brain, your unconscious, is your employee, okay? So you've taught your employee, deal with it this way. And now your employee is like, okay, you've told me to deal with it this way. I've been dealing with it this way. And most of my life that has worked, but now it's not working. And I don't understand, like, the same situation doesn't work anymore, and it's like causing all these problems. So what do I do? So it's like a confused employee that's like, can you please try to understand this? And what do bad bosses do? They don't ever assess the situation. I know from experience that a bad boss, when given a problem, they just create a rule arbitrarily without actually assessing the situation. Like, they don't take the time to observe the situation in action. They don't take the time to observe how the structure or the setup of the environment is impacting the situation. All they do is just arbitrarily create another rule. And that rule doesn't actually apply because they don't actually know why the system is malfunctioning, okay? So it's this kind of, I feel like it's kind of the same way. For me, this has been my experience, where if I try to like rush through it and fake a response, my brain will be like, well, it didn't fucking do anything. So once I understand the situation, then so it comes up to my subconscious mind to be understood. I understand it. I can say like, okay, then I can create neuroplasticity. I can create reprogramming where I'm like, every time the thing comes up to my subconscious mind, I can do reprogramming where I go, okay, you did this because of this. It's okay. You were protecting yourself. Now what we're going to do instead, because it works better this way, we're going to do this because this actually works better. And we are all individuals, like highly individual and unique. So this is like the structure, but you're probably going to have to tailor it. Like sometimes it's not going to be specific thing, a specific sentiment, a specific affirmation repeated over and over and over again. Sometimes it's going to be like a specific meditative experience. Sometimes it's going to be like you have to change the words a little bit as you go. Like it has to be tailored to the person, but that's just, and the situation, but that's like the basic layout. So the subconscious alerts you, then you go back to the neuroplasticity, the rewiring of the neural pathways to reprogram the brain. So you're correcting it. So every time the thing pops back up, you go like, yeah, I understand why you did this before, but we're not doing it like this anymore. In whatever method, in whatever way you're going to do that works best for you. And it's something that has to like fit and feel good to the person experiencing it. And the reason that this applies with the AMC and with dopamine is because it's going to be very hard at first, and the more you do it, the easier it's going to get. Like the more you reprogram and take a different route, it does get easier and easier. However, it doesn't happen quickly. It is so slow. And it's like, sometimes it is like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But sometimes, and I guess sometimes you have like growth spurts where it's really easy for a second. And then sometimes it's like really hard for a second. But it does get easier. I feel like 3 years in, I don't know, like for me, I've been doing this pretty much nonstop for 3 years. And I feel like in the last... more like in the last few months, I have cemented the like understanding of the strategy of the technique, whereas I was like kind of working it together, but I'm to the point where I have like really truly understood the technique. And I feel like that in itself made the process a lot easier. I don't know how much quicker it will go, like as I move through with the understanding, if it'll go any quicker, but it feels like it's been just little tiny steps in the last 3 years. But one thing I have noticed is that also, this is another thing, the dealing with this kind of stuff does make other kind of stuff easier to notice as well. Like if you receive any sort of outside information from higher self guides, anything, things of that nature, ancestors, whatever it is, combination, the dealing with this stuff does make it easier for the other stuff to be picked up. Okay, I've been talking for not that long, but I am running late for work, so I'm gonna stop it here. Thanks, bye.